And I'm going to pass across to fabulous Danielle. And I was going to give her introduction, but just to say, Danielle, we've known each other for quite some time, and from Sports Sister way back when, which seems like over a decade or so ago, and then with the Women's Sport Trust, Danielle's done lots of work in terms of a visual director really for the Women's Sport Trust in those very early days, 2012 and onwards. So our paths have crossed many times, but I'm so grateful to Danielle. Kate and I had a bit of a session with her a month or so ago, and it's absolutely fascinating. So I'm really, really pleased that she's brought this session to us. It's such an important area. So Danielle, I'm going to pass across to you. And just to say to people, any questions, pop them in the chat as we go through, and we've got about 15 minutes at the end, so we'd like to allow for time if people have got specific questions on areas as we're learning. That would be fantastic. Brilliant. So I'll pass across to Danielle now.
Thank you, Sue. Little bit of intro there. So obviously some of you may know me from Sports Sister. We set up in 2008. That's flipping ages ago now. And yeah, 2012 onwards with the Women's Sports Trust. And then, because when I was working at Sports Sister, obviously it was online and print, but when you're online, you create much more. We started creating much more video content because we realized that, you know, people have to be really keen on something to read an article. But if you put a video out there, you know, you don't have to, you know, anyone can just watch a 1-minute video. So we kind of got into videos, and I really got into it and started learning how to make video content. And then whilst I was at Women's Sports Trust, I don't know, probably several of you have been to Banff Film Festival tour or some of the Adventure Film Festival tours. And I sat there and I watched this one on a climber called Hazel Findlay, and she was climbing this sheer rock face with her dad. And it was the only one film in that particular screening with a woman. And it's well over 10 years ago now. And I was sat there with my daughter, and I just, you know, I just thought, I mean, I almost cried because it was so impactful. And I just thought everybody in this room is already involved in the outdoor industry. This should actually be shown at every school in the country to see what women and girls can do. You know, it was that special. So I kind of really got into filmmaking. And through the course of learning how to make films and short videos, I've always concentrated on women's sport, but also within that, touched in sort of disability area. I made a film with Millie Knight, a short film, who's one of the blind Paralympians, Sophie Camlish, who's a sprinter, someone who is deaf and neurodiverse, and, you know, all sorts of different people, which I just found really fascinating and really interesting. And then during lockdown, obviously everything stood still and I had a bit of time, and my daughter was home from university. My daughter was visually impaired at the time. She's always been visually impaired from birth. It's just, you know, it's just life. We've just carried on as normal. It's always been a bit of a battle getting through school and all of that, but she's a bright kid, and, you know, but to be honest, we didn't really think a lot about it apart from when there were struggles. She was just the same as us and enjoyed the great outdoors and went surfing and everything else. But then her eyesight actually deteriorated and she went blind, and she started using audio description. And to my shame, I didn't even know audio description existed. And basically, if anybody doesn't know, I'm going to talk about it briefly in the actual presentation, but it's a voiceover that fills in the gaps of when a film's showing. So for her, because she does have some eyesight, but she has, you know, reduced eyesight, and it fills in all those bits that she can't really tell. So it describes what's happening on screen. And I realized to my shame that she couldn't even at this point access my own work. So in lockdown, I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn how to audio describe, I'm going to learn captions, I'm going to learn audio accessibility features. And that's basically where it started, where this whole project started. And I've kind of really got into it. I've done loads of courses now. I'm doing another one in audio description with a top guy in America next month. And yeah, it's really fascinating. It's also really growing and really exciting area to be involved with. So a couple of the things that I'm doing in the next couple of weeks, to actually talking to the Banff Film Festival, which is a really nice round circle, and doing this presentation with them for their filmmakers to teach them how to make their films accessible. We've got a session at the Sheffield Adventure Film Festival, which is completely accessible with audio description, open captions, and some British Sign Language language as well. And we also did the same at Kendal Mountain Festival last November. And so it's an ongoing project where I'm kind of trying to encourage everybody to make their content accessible, from everybody from filmmakers like myself through to just video content and social media. So that's my story, why I'm in it. It's an ever evolving thing. You know, I'm learning all the time. I'm adding to this all the time. I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of them. So I'm going to share some of them now, and hopefully you'll have some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. So here we go. I'm going to try and share the screen. Now, it did work just now, so fingers crossed it will work, and I can get my PDF up. Ooh. Okay, let's come on. Right, is that working? Nod?
Yeah, all fabulous, fabulous.
Okay, thank you. Right, so this is the first screen, and it's not a test, but I just would like you to remember that image, because we'll discuss it as I go through, and there's alt text at the bottom there. You don't need to read it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit further on. And the other thing is there's going to be a free handout about alt text in particular that Sue and Kate will organise. So you don't need to make copious notes, just listen and enjoy. Okay. So what are we talking about today specifically? So I'm going to talk about alt text on images on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm going to talk a little bit about language, font style, emojis and GIFs. I'm going to talk about accessible captions. That's quite a big one. And then I'm just going to touch on audio description and British Sign Language. Obviously, there's too much on all of these things to go through them all in great detail. But I can, follow up another time if people want that. So that's what we're talking about. So now why should we make our content accessible? So I'm just going to start with the big one, really. It is actually the law. Now, it's very unlikely that anybody's going to sue you because they can't access your content. But it is starting to happen more. A young woman went to, I think it was a Pink concert, and the Support Act didn't have any accessibility. So Pink actually had a signer on stage, sign language, doing British Sign Language, but the Support Act didn't. And the young woman, she couldn't access it all. And so she actually successfully sued because the event wasn't accessible. So, I'm just saying it, most disabled people are just too busy getting on with their lives and fighting all their other battles. But it is worth knowing that it is actually the law to make reasonable adjustments that disabled people can access your services. Probably what's more important from that is exclusion. Now, most of us are women on this call, and we're here because at some point in our lives, we've probably been discriminated against for being women, certainly in sport, and certainly us oldies who've been around for a while, been battling away to get equality for women. So we know how it feels to be just excluded, ignored. And it's the emotional impact of that is enormous. And it's especially for young people where social media is a huge part of their culture. So Tyrone on that image on your screen, fantastic javelin thrower with cerebral palsy sport, and he's visually impaired. And I always sort of say, to people, imagine saying to him, I'm sorry, I can't be bothered to do alt text. I can't be bothered to do captions. You're not important enough for me to make it accessible. Your needs are not important to me. Imagine somebody and imagine saying it. And I think that kind of really helps frame, why it's important, and it shouldn't make a difference whether it's someone or you love who can't access it, but it does make a difference. So imagine to you that it's your son or daughter or friend or mother or whatever, and they can't access it because somebody can't be bothered to do alt text. I know that sounds emotional blackmailing, but it's the reality for a lot of people that just can't access it, and emotionally that's really hard. And especially if you're a young person who a lot of So there's so much amazing content out there. There's so much in sport that is done on social media. And if you can't access it, then you're not part of the gang, you're not part of that culture, and you're not enjoying it to the full as everybody else. And I think if you're an organization or a company, you have to bear in mind how that actually reflects on your organization and your company. So, you know, it's not just, okay, so they feel excluded and that's just a horrible feeling, but it also doesn't mean, it means that they don't particularly look on your organization in a great light. The one thing I will say, certainly for my daughter, her friends, the disabled community that I've met over the years, incredibly loyal to people that make an effort, even, you know, even a small effort. People, if there's a recognition, there's an understanding, there's some accommodations, there is incredible loyalty from the disabled community. The other thing I would say is, can you imagine excluding any other marginalized group? Now, we know how it feels as women to be marginalized, excluded. But imagine if you were denying access based on someone's, you know, race, sexual orientation. I mean, obviously we wouldn't do that. And yet disabled people are discriminated and excluded on a daily basis. So, reach. This is the exciting bit. This is why it's worth doing, even if you don't care about all the emotional stuff. So 20% of the UK has a disability, which, you know, is a huge number. I'm constantly surprised at that, but it covers all disabilities. So basically, if you're not making your content accessible, you're potentially missing out on a huge section of the UK. 11 million people in the UK are deaf or hard of hearing, and, you know, there's 151,000 BSL users. British Sign Language, I'm just going to add in here, this is British Sign Language is British, so, you know, like, it doesn't work in America, has its own language, other countries have their own version, so British Sign Language is just for British users. 2 million people in the UK are blind or partially sighted. 700,000 people are on the autistic spectrum. And then you've got to think about things like with captions that you might be, as an accessibility thing, they're also fantastic for, you know, if English isn't your first language, and that's 8% of our population. That's a decent extra chunk of people that are going to be able to access and also learn English as well at the same time, improve their language skills. Okay, additional benefits. Okay, so I'm in my 50s. I'm sure my hearing's going. I quite often have the captions on now, and especially, I don't know if there's strong accents, or I don't know, I just find it easier now because I'm working in this field. I actually find it easier to have captions on. So, and that's true of a lot of other people too. So 80% of the people using captions are using them for a reason other than hearing loss. Which is, a huge amount. And I think many of us will have used the captions when we're on a bus or whatever, or a train, and you don't want to have the sound on, so you use the captions. So I'm sure that's, it's really understandable. But captions are also good for people with autism, because they cut out noise and overload. And, it's for some people who are autistic, just to be able to read the captions in a calm and quiet environment is better than having the sound. It's not the same for everybody, but it is for some. Captions also help with literacy and spelling generally. So, great for kids, teenagers, or adults that aren't great at spelling, like me, and especially where English isn't the first language. Actually go training with somebody who's from Portugal, and she's so excited that ITV have got captions on everything now. She's like, oh my goodness, I can access everything and I'm learning English at the same time. It's really fantastic. Captions also really help people, as I said, tune into different accents, regional and foreign. And the other thing about this is that they prevent any discrimination. So you've probably seen programs where they've just put captions on some people's accents and not on everybody's accents. So where maybe something's muffled, or they think, or whoever's done the captions think that particular bit is hard to hear, but the rest of it is fine. you know, I talked about this at the Kendal Film Festival. We did some workshops up there, and somebody came over to me afterwards, and she was just like, God, you're so right. They had done a film, and her own parents, who had quite strong Jamaican accents, they had put the captions just on that bit. And I was like, but you understand what she said? Yeah, I know. And it's ridiculous because I understand it, but I figured nobody else would understand it. But her parents wouldn't necessarily have understood all the rest of it. So if you just have captions for everything, there isn't any discrimination. You're not singling anybody out or othering anybody for having a different accent. So, you know, that's a win-win. And obviously captions help if the sound recording is poor or quiet or muffled. You know, you can't always go back and capture something again. If it's just a one-off moment and the sound's terrible, add some captions. Alt text and captions help boost your search engine optimization. And there's a couple of quotes, stats here, sorry, from Stage Text, who are the deaf charity that that I did my training with. On social media, a video with captions is 80% more likely to be watched until the end, which is amazing. And then also research shows that videos with captions get a 10% increase in likes, 26% increase in shares, and 29% increase in comments. So I think that's pretty obvious that there's huge benefit there. And it's because the engagement is great and more people are engaging fully with it. So, you know, that's amazing. So alt text. Now, I'm sure some of you are familiar with alt text. Not everybody is yet. Basically, it's the written description of an image or a GIF, not video. So on, like on Twitter, if you've got a picture, you can actually describe that picture. So basically, it's for blind or visually impaired people to help them access the content, and they'll use a screen reader technology on their phone or computer, which will read that information out for them and describe the picture. And it's a game changer for disabled people. It's a game changer for my daughter. I mean, she has her screen reader on speeded up mode, and it's quite something because it's literally, but she gets it, you know, because she's just tuned into it, and she just zooms through everything, listens, and moves on. So it's a game changer for her, but only if everybody knows about it, respects it, and does it properly. So one of the things I would say is avoid being too clever. And I'll come on to that in a minute, and only use alt text for its intended audience. Now, other people will benefit from it. There's some amazing little projects going on. There's one by a disabled artist in America called Alt Text as Poetry, where they do workshops where people actually really make a thing of the alt text, so that it's actually like almost a hidden little gift for the people that are accessing it, and most other people don't know it's there. And they've really concentrated on doing beautifully worded image descriptions so that people get something special. It's a treat. So my example, so when I said to you at the beginning, remember what this picture looks like, there's a little snip of it on the screen there, but it's not the whole thing. So the image description I've written for this: an atmospheric photo of an athletics track at dusk. It's been raining and puddles are illuminated by spotlights. There's a row of silhouetted trees surrounding the track, and the sky behind indicates the passing of rain clouds and a hint of sunset. So that's a description of that photograph that I took at dusk on a athletics track. Most people would probably just put, athletics track at dusk or something. And that's kind of fine. But how much nicer to actually describe what you're seeing, actually describe the whole sensory experience that the rest of us are getting, because it's a very atmospheric picture. And there's a lot of information in the picture that we will all pick up, regardless of whether or not we're even thinking that we're picking it up. Things like there having been rain, because there are puddles, all of those things that add to the sense of the occasion, the time, the weather, the atmosphere generally. We all pick those up if we can see, if we have good eyesight. Other people can't. So, enjoy the process of writing really descriptive alt text. So here's a couple of bad ones. This is what not to do. So they're using alt text as a joke or a sort of a clever way to communicate with your tribe. Manchester United did a massive no-no. Some of you may have seen this because it was in the papers a lot. It got quite a lot of, there was quite a big fuss about it. So basically their tweet was it just said, read the alt text with this picture. And the alt text then goes, what's the greatest player in the Premier, oh, sorry, who's the greatest player in the Premier League? It's you, Juan. So it's kind of, they're trying to be clever, they're using the alt text as a kind of, a bit of a joke, bit smart, bit cheeky. But obviously that image description is not an image description of the picture. That isn't describing the picture. So that means we're back to that thing where people are feeling excluded because they're not in on the joke. They don't get it. They don't know because they can't see what they don't know what that's about because the alt text is not describing the picture. And it's an abuse of an accessible tool in the same way as whichever Gallagher brother it was that showed off about going on the accessible stage at Glastonbury and then got absolutely cancelled for it. Like it's not a game. This is people's access needs. And then this other one, I mean, lionesses, I bloody love lionesses. And obviously it was an amazing event last summer. And they went to an awful lot of effort to do some incredible imagery. And this is what we have all working in women's sport been aiming for God knows how long. So fantastic graphics, a beautiful poster with lots of images of Ellen in lots of different positions, scoring goals, being funny, everything that shows her personality, her character, her number, that's a lot of work in there. And their image description is, thank you, Ellen, 113 caps, 52 goals, which is not a description of that picture. So, people missed out on seeing all the effort that's gone into that fantastic poster. And, I think that's a shame. Okay, so here's a few kind of, best practice. Again, this is all going to be in the handout, so don't panic too much about writing it all down. Keep it concise. Up to 140 is best practice. Sometimes it can be less, sometimes it can be more. I mean, I tend to do more just because I'm kind of really into it, but not for the sake of it. So yeah, use your judgment, but 140 is best practice. And then you can save space by, you don't have to say image of or photograph of, because obviously that's a known thing. The screen reader will recognize that as an image and let the user know. But there are some exceptions. So if it's like a painting or a graph or that amazing poster that we just saw of Ellen, then it's worth stating that it is a poster or it is a graph or whatever that specific thing, or maybe it's a black and white photo or a vintage, so it's worth describing those details. It's also good to provide context. Now, really, alt text is just a visual description, like say what you see. But I do think, if there is atmosphere or a particular feel, whether it's upbeat, nostalgic, miserable, whatever it is, I think it's worth writing that within your alt text, because again, it's picking up on those messages that the rest of us will have got from the image, but wouldn't necessarily be naturally written down. Now, there is a debate over describing colour because some people can see colour and some people can't. Some people have never seen colour. I tend to use colour. It's partly because I've always used colour. It's hard as a design background person not to use colour. So the best way to get around that is if you describe colour by linking it to another sensory experience. So, raspberry yellow or sandy yellow, or, like if it's you know, like a luminous, you know, it'd be like a safety neon yellow, or a, you know, something that gives an indication of the sort of level of color. Or, you know, if it's a soft rose pink, that kind of gives you a very different feel to a raspberry pink, which is like a juicy, you know, stronger color. So that's, you know, it's lots of things to think about. I recognize there's a lot, so, you know, you're not going to do all of this straight away, but it's just good to think about these things. The other thing is, like, if an image is a meme or a funny response to something that's happening culturally, you know, try and explain it. Like, it's, again, that's excluding, it's that exclusion thing, you know, reference it. Like, I still don't totally get memes, I'll be honest, I'm too old for that whole malarkey. You know, I sometimes have to say, what is this, you know, to my kids. But if you do know, then please explain what it is. And then I'll look at it too and find out. Now, this is really important. Describe diversity, state ethnicity, if you know it, skin color, if someone's a wheelchair user, anything like that. We all have unconscious bias. If you're watching TV and you have a very well-spoken solicitor as one of the actors in this show that you're watching, a lot of us, our unconscious bias will imagine a white person. So if that person is Black, please describe them. Or they will certainly, very unlikely, imagine that that person is a wheelchair user. So it's really important that that is stated. And it's important because then that helps change people's unconscious bias as well. Now, and the main thing, I should really put it at the beginning, this, because I think this is really important. Enjoy the process. Don't view it as a chore. You know, if you believe in equality, then you should be doing this as standard. So, you know, just start baby steps. You don't have to go the whole hog with the whole super description stuff, but just get started. That would be great. Okay, language, a little bit on language, and other little things that you might not have thought about. And some of this I've only just sort of learned about recently myself. But I'm just going to start with language. And on the handout, there is a link to the government advice on language. And it's really useful. And it's also got some stuff about like how to treat people, how to talk to people who are disabled. And I think it's universally agreed that it's a pretty good document for a government document. So one of the things they say, avoid passive victim words, you know, use language that respects disabled people as active individuals with control over their own lives. So, you know, exactly the same as you treat anybody else in your life. There's a whole thing on actual language and words. So one of the things that they have in there, and is a real bugbear of mine, is able-bodied. Now, even disabled people use this because we're so used to it as a language. But in the context of sport, I personally think that it is a terrible use to say able-bodied. And because you're suggesting then that someone that's disabled is less able or is not able. So the best thing for me, I would always use, would be non-disabled. So disabled and non-disabled, not able-bodied and disabled. You know, that's just a bugbear. I'm putting it out there. But it's also in the government guidelines as a word to avoid. So have a look on that when you get a handout. There's all sorts of really useful stuff on there. When you're doing your hashtags and your usernames and all that kind of stuff, please capitalize the first letter of each word. It's easier to read. Obviously, this drives me mad anyway. I personally struggle with these, but lots of people will struggle because it's all, you know, you can't work out whether you're dyslexic, whether you're, you know, visually impaired. It's hard to work out what it is. So please try and use capitals for the first letter, and use sentence case, not all caps. Don't shout with all caps, because it's really difficult to understand. Avoid using over fancy fonts, especially sort of the handwritten styles, because they're really hard for people to work out what they say. And that's for lots of people, whether you're visually impaired or, you know, whatever it is, a lot of people find that hard to read. Limit your use of animated GIFs. Motion can be a problem for some people. Now, I mean, you know, we all like them from time to time, but just don't do it every time, you know. And this is a really interesting one because I've done this so many times. You know that thing where you're doing a tweet or something and you just put like a big news, gap, 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 and then you announce it at the bottom like some big reveal. That's a real problem for some people because they have to scroll, or they might not realize they've got to scroll and then they miss it and it's confusing. Just leave one line or two at the very most, you know, and that'll avoids people having to scroll who may find it difficult to scroll. And here's a nice one. So this is about color contrast in banners and those sort of quote style posts that you have. There's a free online checker. Again, it's on the document that Sue's going to send out to see how well your color combination works for people. This is actually an American thing. So WCAG is an American compliant. So you don't have to worry about that side of it. But I think it's a really useful tool. So I've put a bad and a good on there. So the orange fails on everything. So it fails for small text, large text, and whatever UI components are. User, I don't know. Anyway, but basically, it'll be those little icons. It's quite hard to watch. It's quite hard. I mean, I can read it, but it's not super clear. Whereas the good one on the other side with the yellow and black, it's what the BBC use for their sport, brilliant, is one of the best for people being able to access it. And it's got a contrast ratio of nearly 20 there, which is about as good as it gets, really. Okay, captions. How am I doing for time? Right, captions. So people that are doing videos, putting things out on social media with automated captions. Oh, okay. Now, obviously automated captions are fantastic, and but I've seen some really good stuff go out recently, even within this network, with automated captions that don't make any sense whatsoever. And I think to myself, is nobody else looking at these? You know, please change your automated, you know, correct them, check them. Anyway, captions, accessible open captions. So as opposed to subtitles, which, I mean, there's not a hard and fast rule here, but I prefer to keep them separate. So for me, subtitles are like foreign language films, and captions, accessible open captions, means that they have access needs as well as writing down the actual language, the narration that's happening in a film or video. The open captions means it's open all the time. It's always on screen, always open captions. And the accessibility bit of it means that it also identifies other sounds. So you're identifying speakers, non-speech elements, and they're pretty much always in the same language as the video. So that's accessible open captions. As I said, they're always on the screen and can't be turned off. Now, Stage Text would argue on this that there is no disadvantage to not having them, on the screen. A lot of filmmakers, you know, they don't want them on there because they say it spoils the aesthetic or whatever. Stage Text quite rightly would say, you know, just put them up there, makes no difference. People are used to it now, just go for it. As I said, auto-generated captions do not meet access needs. They don't meet a lot of access. They don't meet they don't meet a lot of needs, because quite often the spelling's wrong. Sometimes the actual meaning can be really wrong. I used them for a film I did recently, and I just couldn't work out what was wrong. There was one thing, and it was just one word was wrong, and it just completely changed the whole meaning of a very important part of the film. So please do check them and go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Don't just scroll through quickly. Now, personally, because the auto-generated captions are not always that great, I prefer just to transcribe it myself. But then I'm a filmmaker, so you know, I work within Premiere Pro, so you know, not everyone's going to have that same ability to do that, but that's what I do. I think for me, the captions are a significant part of the experience, so I want to do them well because I want my audience to have a really good experience. And you know, again, much like that alt text poetry, there's a really fun side to this. So like creative captions can become a thing in their own right. So Stranger Things got all sorts of like like fan base, people going mental about the, sorry, I shouldn't even use that. See, you shouldn't use mental. We all do it. People getting really excited about the creative captions that they used in Stranger Things. So I put a couple of them on here. So like discomforting, slithering, and eerie music swelling, which I think, you know, are really nice because, you know, you kind of get the sense of that, but like you certainly wouldn't know about the slithering from that particular screen grab there. And there were whole articles in the New York Times and things like that where people were just loving how creative they were. So, you know, it's really, really nice that people can get behind it and see it as a really positive thing. So here's just a couple of sort of, indicators of things to do. So describing the music and any sounds, so you put them in brackets so that it's clear that that is a descriptive term, not a spoken term. So in the rowing boat, the waves are breaking against the side of the boat. She's not saying that. It's no one is saying that. It's what's actually happening, and that's the sound. And then we've also got excited screaming at the cerebral palsy frame football over there. So it was very, very noisy and very excited. And when you're coming to do, you've got speakers, very often you'll have a speaker who's not actually on the screen. So you need to identify who that is. So at the bottom there, you've got Anna Marie, any high point that you look. So she speaks before she is seen in this film. And then she does come on screen later. So, but because I haven't changed it, the name, you only put it at the beginning of her narrative, and then it'll carry on and you'll know that that's Anna Marie when she comes on the screen. And then if you've got two people talking at the same time, you probably maybe have seen this on TV. You can have it in two different colors. So this is Molly's mum saying, "Do you like it, Moll?" And Molly says, "Yeah," in a different color. So that's simple things. I mean, you could just put their names as well. It doesn't really matter. It's just personal choices, different ways of doing it, and different organizations prefer different ways of doing things. So audio description. How am I doing? I'm just going to talk very briefly just to give you an overview of what this is. So as I said at the beginning, it's basically where somebody describes what's happening in a film or a video in the space between the words and the narration that's happening. So the through audio description is what happens throughout the whole film. So whilst the actual film or performance, this happens at theatre as well through headphones, you have a live audio describer who explains what's happening. I've even been to audio described ballet at Sadler's Wells, where you can imagine that's a huge job describing all the movements of the dancers. So it's a really great accessibility tool. Audio introduction is something different. It's the same, but it happens before anything happens. So you get it at the theatre, everyone will put their headphones on 15 minutes before, and there'll be a lot of explanation about what is going to happen to give the audience member some context before it even happens. And this is an opportunity to describe some of the key characters. It comes back to things like describing the ethnicity of people, or if someone's disabled. It gives you that space to add a lot more depth to what is going to happen and what they're going to see. I like doing them for film too. And so if I do a film now, if it's a 6-minute film, just a short film, it may be that the audio described version is a 7-minute film, and there's 1 minute of a still with the audio introduction happening before the film starts. And that gives me the opportunity to really set the scene and describe the characters. And some people really love audio description when they're starting to use it almost like a podcast. When I did this presentation up at Kendall, somebody got in touch afterwards, and he said, you know, he's been diagnosed halfway through his life as having ADHD and autism and various things, which means he can't ask questions at you know, in a situation like this. So he emailed me afterwards, and he said that he listened to a film that I had done with audio description. He'd started watching it, and then he'd got up. He was watching it in bed at 6 o'clock in the morning randomly. He'd got up and he'd gone for a walk, and he just listened to it, and he said, oh my goodness, what a beautiful experience that was. And he felt he didn't actually need to watch the film having listened to it, which I thought was just really wonderful. So it's not just a tool for people that are visually impaired. And then, there we go, British Sign Language. The last thing just to touch on, as I said, British Sign Language is just for people who speak British Sign Language. You know, anybody that watched Strictly, who saw Rose winning it last year, will know a bit about British Sign Language. But it's very much a cultural thing, and we have started doing British Sign Language for a project that I'm doing with Berg House. So we're doing 3 films that are being audio described, open captions, and then we also have a British Sign Language version that's being done for us via Remark in London. And you know, there's lots of stuff around best practice for this. It's for anybody that wants to know more about this. I don't personally do it. I bring in the experts, but there are a few things, like you can just use a green screen tool. So you literally just get the person, you can probably see in the picture, rather than it being a block in the corner of the screen. And that means that you can keep as much of the film on there. And you're not blocking any visual elements, but it also needs to be big enough, so at least 1/4 of the width of the video, to ensure that the movements are clear. Yeah, Anna, so that's it really. I'm just going to finish there with my thank you, and I checked my colors on the checker. I was like, shall I do white against black? And I thought, no, I'm going to see whether that pink works, and it does too. So that's passed. So there we go. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. I love those colours. It's very Angel City, those colours at the end there, aren't they? That nice. Thank you so much. I was making notes and whatever. There's so much, I think, that's in there for all of us to learn and take away. Do people have got questions? They want to either put them in the chat or let us know if they want to ask questions. And I've certainly got a couple to kick us off with. And I think we did speak before. I guess one of mine is a bit of a general, a bit of a personal question, really, isn't it? I feel embarrassed that even from the last time we spoke with you before Christmas, and Kate and I were like, oh yeah, fantastic, of course we must do this, whatever. And then even in the last week, I'm sharing images and I've completely forgotten that I should be using alt text. So is it a matter of, clearly it's discipline and it's routine and all those things, but do you have any advice for people getting started with it? Because I imagine even something's better than nothing. So is it almost trying to set yourself, because you're a beautiful description of that track. I was like, oh my, yeah, that's amazing. But actually the amount of content people are sharing, it would be hard to come in initially with the aiming.
So there's several things here. I mean, I forget sometimes, you know, and then God, you know, I'll have to take it down and start again because that's ridiculous. Yeah, it is a routine, and I always sort of describe it as being back to like when we all first started having to do social media. Some of us will remember when social media didn't exist, and we're like, oh my gosh, now I've got to tweet every day as well, and now I've got to do this, and now I've got to Instagram, Facebook. I've got, you know, we all moaned about like, oh God, there's so much we have to do. So I would say, you know, like, and now we don't even think about, oh, I've got to tweet, because it's something you do. So I would try and get your head around it in that respect, that it is just something part of what we do, and it needs to become part of a routine. I would say try and do less and do it properly, because I think that reflects better. The other thing is, so if you're going to do alt text and you're doing it across various different platforms, just write it in email yourself the alt text first, and then you can just cut and paste it in. Because it, you know, so you can go, oh, I've done it in Twitter, and then you go, oh, I'm just going to put, oh gosh, I'm going to have to do that again, you know, like, so you can save yourself time by just being kind of systematic about it. One thing I didn't mention is there is, well, apparently there is automated alt text in Facebook. Can I just assure you, it's absolutely shockingly terrible. Don't ever rely on automated alt text, because it very often doesn't even recognize it. I can't even remember what it was, but I imagine it was that picture of the track, and it said something like possibly a dog walking or something. It's like a possibly with a question mark. So, you know, like it literally didn't bear any relation to what was there. So don't rely on any if it says it's automated. Try and just make it a routine, and just baby steps. Just start. Just just get your head into that place when you put a picture up and just think, okay, what am I seeing? Literally one sentence. What am I seeing? It doesn't take time.
I'm going to move on to other questions here, but I'm going to jump in quickly with my second question if I can, which is, I did try to start using it, and then I had people who might be, I think I was with Tanny Gray Thompson. So do you put who the person is? If the person's not a person that's known, would you put two women, one, would you describe the women, or are you describing who they are, as in by name, as individuals, or is it more the description of what you would?
So you're describing what you're seeing, really. So most people looking at a picture of, like, so some people are going to know who Tanny Gray Thompson is, some people are not. So you would just describe Tanny Gray Thompson as how she looks. So, I should have done a description of myself. We should all really do a description of ourselves as well on these calls for people that can't see. So, I'm a white woman in my 50s with long fair hair and wearing a black jumper, and I've got light grey glasses. It's just as simple as that, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And then a couple of questions there. So Gemma's got a question. Please could you explain a bit about how AD works alongside video and audio in terms of describing a scene at the same time as the person speaking on the film? Would you advise leaving a space to AD?
So if you're making a film before, like if you're actually creating it, the best thing, if you're really serious about this, then you leave spaces. So I've been asked to audio describe a film, and there's literally no gaps. So you don't talk over anybody. You only do the audio description in the gaps. So, a lot of adventure films are you have a lot of voiceover describing someone's experience. And sometimes there's literally no gap at all. So I encourage people, like, we all need, even if you're not listening to the audio description, we all actually do need pauses of spoken sometimes. And if there are pauses, then that gives the audio describer the opportunity to describe the scene or the person or the action of whatever's happening. But if it is, so I don't know if that explain it. So you're not talking over anybody, you're just speaking in the gaps. And sometimes there'll be a sort of section with lots of music. And if I'm doing it personally, I'll lower the music so that you can hear the audio describer. And the other thing I didn't mention is that I'm big on, and this isn't really a thing, but I'm kind of big on having a voice that is reflective of the video. So I quite often, although I might have written the audio description, I'll actually have a voiceover actor or a friend or somebody come and read it who I think is more suitable. So if it's like, I know, some cool surf video, I'm not necessarily the best voice for that, although I do surf, but I might, if it's about youngsters or boys or whatever, I would want to have a boy do the audio description so that it is reflective of the culture and the image, the style of the film. Sorry, I've gone on there.
No, that's really good. It's all fascinating, all very thought-provoking, fascinating. Another question around the open captions, and I'm slightly conscious it might be my video on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's almost started generating automatic open captioning. So Gemma's asked there, can you explain a little bit more around when you say use open captions? Do you mean having captions burnt into the video so it can't be removed, or just ensuring accessible edited captions are available to turn on and off as necessary?
Well, so there's two views. I mean, stage text would say they should just be burnt in. So they're just always there and everybody sees them and they can't be turned off because, like if someone's settings aren't automatically showing them or they're using them on a different device, they're not going to be able to access them. So, best practice is that they're burnt in and left on all the time. But if that isn't the case and you want to have different versions, then, fine, have ones that can be turned off, but accessible captions still need to have the descriptions of other sounds as well as the spoken voice.
So from a practical point of view, if someone's going to, if you've got some video, we're just sharing video, it does look like LinkedIn now is automatically.
Yeah, maybe that's where I saw these really bad ones.
They're really bad, and they come right across the they almost don't sit beneath the image either, unless you open it right up. So as you scan through on LinkedIn, it blocks almost the picture, so it's not good for anybody, so you can't really see it, and they're poor captions too. So I guess how would you go about improving those to make sure They are better, because I think that, I guess at this moment in time, the thought of people, you obviously take your transcript and then you align it to your content. But if people are just sharing, if I'm going to now share this webinar, and actually that's interesting for us in terms of, well, after we had the call with you, this is a meeting and we don't caption this, but you can but through Zoom you can't caption meetings, but you can caption webinars. But actually, if people aren't going to go and do the whole transcript, is there a better way to improve the automatic caption, or are you just stuck with the auto caption?
Yeah, so I don't really know about LinkedIn, because it's literally just started doing it, so it's something I need to go and look in, but I'm almost certain that there will be an opportunity to go back and change that. Certainly, like in YouTube, you can edit it yourself,
right?
And you can change the size, and you can change the things that are wrong. So obviously that would be ridiculous if LinkedIn have done it and you can't actually change it because if it's making mistakes. So I'm Microsoft. I imagine that we will be able to, and I will look into that and let you know about LinkedIn, because it's literally just started doing it this year, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Say this year. It is this year. It's this month, isn't it? It does feel the last few weeks you've suddenly seen that.
I mean, it's a fast changing world. I mean, like Twitter, for example, thank you, Twitter. They've been one of the best with alt text, for example. So you can actually see that it says alt text on the image, that everybody knows what, like it's constantly reminding you that it's there. And they are one of the best. Facebook are pretty bad because it's all hidden, and Instagram also, because it's kind of hidden, so you can't see it, so you can't necessarily see the changes, and keeping up with everything is there's quite a lot to keep up with. So like the one thing I would say is, don't beat yourself up about it. If it's we're all just trying to make a difference here, and we'll share as much as we can as we find new stuff out.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And I think if people, it's lovely to know almost within the collective, we can share our learnings and what we're doing, but obviously share details of what's gone here. But I think it's not a new area for all of us. Clearly, there are some people that are amazing at it and have been doing it for a while. But for those that are new to the space, I think it is good to be supportive and see what others are doing. And, if there's advice and suggestions to help make that process easier. But thank you so much, Danielle. I really appreciate that. And we'll share share Danielle's kind of guide to alt text and her details too, if people want to get in contact and find out more as well. And obviously a recording of this session too, but not with captions, but maybe they will be. That should be our commitment, that we should start captioning our meetings.
Yeah, and yeah, just to reiterate, if people want to get in touch separately, the information is going to be on the handout that I'm going to send through to Kate soon now, so please get in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody that's been on the call, and we'll see some of you again soon in future networking meetings. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you very much.
Bye.